What a beautiful bird. Great blue heron. It's the biggest heron in this part of the world. An apex predator that requires a pretty complete ecosystem. That's what we've got here. We're in the middle of Forest Park. We're in a gigantic city park, and yet we're seeing apex carnivores like great blues. That's because this entire site has been restored to a natural area. And today we're going to paddle around this park. We're going to see some of the trees, the plants, the wildlife that make this place so special, and that make St. Louis so special as a stop along the Great Mississippi Flyway, the largest migration of wildlife on this side of the planet. So come along with us. Thank you guys for your interest. Thank you guys for getting in the water with me today. Well, welcome to the park. Before we get started with our tour, I just want to introduce myself real quick. My name is Matt Fox. I've been a field biologist for more than 20 years. I've been a safari guide. I've worked all over South America, Africa, Asia, studying large carnivores mostly. Large carnivores, like we have filling this entire park. But I've also studied birds quite a bit, and I find them absolutely fascinating. And we do have a ton of really interesting birds in this park. And we actually have a lot more birds in the park than you would find in the surrounding wilderness, which is kind of strange. And we'll get into it on this adventure, and we'll talk about why that is. And we'll talk about what makes this lake so special. Like I said, it's man-made. This is not a natural formation, and yet it's habitat for dozens and dozens of species of birds. I've seen 7 species of turtle in the water here, and there's only 9 in the state of Missouri, so this is doing pretty great. And it's a wonderful project, and it's only been going since the 1990s, and it already looks this wild. All right, guys, so let's head out. Restoration ecology is playing offense for Mother Earth. And I just loved that sentiment. I love that idea. Conservation is good and it's important, but it's like putting a glass jar over the last donut and telling people not to touch it, not to eat it. And ultimately, it never works in the long run. We always just take another bite and then another tiny bite, and we cut those preserved areas smaller and smaller as resources are discovered or resources are needed. And ultimately, restoration ecology is the only way to ensure wild places and wild creatures for future generations. So I really took that to heart. And this park, this place here, is a beautiful example of restoration ecology. Look around. We're in a wild lake right now. And so as we paddle along today, I want you guys to think about that. Think about how you are in a wilderness. And think about how that wilderness was created by humankind. We're coming up on our first critter. What we've got dead ahead looks to me like a red-eared slider. Now, red-eared sliders are river turtles. Now, I like red-eared sliders. They're super, super effective, and you find them all over. They're the most common turtle in this part of the country by far, and they're doing great in this park. Hence why this turtle is able to reach such a wonderful old age. Now, they're generalists. They eat small creatures in the water column. They also swim down to the bottom, and they'll try their hand at eating bigger creatures like crayfish. All turtles have a pretty good bite. It's just a quality that they have. We think of turtles as slow. That makes sense. Most of the turtles we see are tortoises. But in the water, that guy is a lightning bolt. Most river turtles can swim faster than the very fastest human beings can swim. And they need to. A lot of these turtles are piscivorous. And that's a term that's going to come up again. Piscivorous just means an animal that eats fish. So that is a piscivorous turtle. And that means that he's definitely not catching the fish from the shore. He's chasing them in the water and is able to catch them while swimming. A faster swimmer than the fish that it's after. Now, another thing we're going to be talking about a lot today is disturbance. Has anybody ever heard this term in a natural context before? Disturbance? Disturbance is important. Disturbance is what we in the biology world would call a natural disaster of any kind. But we call it disturbance because nature does not believe in disasters. Man, look at that beautiful great egret. I think they are such pretty birds. Hopefully we'll see quite a few of those today on our trip. Great egrets do very well in full sunlight. So hold on to that nugget. We'll see when we catch another one closer. We'll talk all about that. But yeah, disturbance is super important. In nature, there is no such thing as a disaster. Everything that is awful for one organism is necessary for another. We've got 2 female mallards coming by. You guys recognize that there was this gigantic storm that came by recently. And it did a huge amount of damage, felled a ton of trees, destroyed a bunch of people's homes, and really was not great for humankind. However, as we paddle around, we're going to see a lot of this. A downed tree that was ripped out of the ground by the strength of that hurricane. And we're going to see how Mother Nature is using this new resource. Oh, nice. Let's go check that out. So this gigantic creature right here, this is a great blue heron. It's the largest heron in this part of the world. You can always tell a heron from an egret because all egrets are all white. And nothing in nature is without reason. An all-white egret, like the great egret we just saw, is able to stay 80% cooler than a heron. 80%. And that's because of a quality of organisms and places called albedo. Albedo is the ability of something to reflect light. A heron like this guy is not able to do that. He's got all these dark patterns which serve an important purpose as well. It's called cryptic coloration, which is a big sciencey term which means camouflage. And so he's got that dark cryptic coloration, which makes his hunting more effective. He can stand along the bank, blend in with the blues and grays of the sky, and hunt fish very effectively and quickly. Versus the egret, which really sticks out. And as an ambush carnivore, he has less of a success chance. But he can do it all day. He can stand there and do it for 12 hours if he needed to. And he can get a ton of fish. And I love that. That's called biological resilience. 2 organisms that are sharing a similar niche that do something very similar in nature, so that if one of them faces extinction from disease or habitat loss or something specific to that organism, then there's another creature in the system that can do the exact same thing. It's important. It adds to the robustness of an ecosystem. Oh, here he comes. Stretching that long neck. You can see how long that creature is. Now they can be very tall. They can be more than 5 feet tall, and their wings can be more, their wingspan in total can be more than 6.5 feet. So they're gigantic. But even with that huge size, they only weigh 5.5 pounds, which is typical. Birds sacrifice so much in order to be able to fly. They're just balanced on the edge of a razor. If they can't fly, in most cases, they won't survive. So maintaining flight capability is critical to their survival. The Central Park effect. Have you guys heard of this before? Central Park effect, it's really cool. So this was discovered quite some years ago, and it's named after Central Park, of course, in New York. It was discovered that there was so much more density of bird life within the park than there was in the surrounding suburbs and even the surrounding wilderness around New York City. And this initially stumped the biologists doing the research. But over time, it became clear, and it makes a lot of sense to me, that there are some really good reasons for this. Because the park is surrounded by this wasteland of city where birds absolutely cannot land, where they can't find water, where they can't find food, a sudden forest with both water and food is highly enticing. You've got to think like a bird. And so that park becomes the ultimate place to land and refuel. You might be migrating on a long journey, and man, a little bit of water and some fresh food will do you good. So these trees, these guys that look like pines with all these knobby little balls sticking around on them, I think these are very cool. So as we pass them, you'll notice these little woody protrusions coming out of the bank, and you'll probably notice that this tree is on an island. Well, this tree isn't just on an island. This tree is an island. This is a bald cypress, Taxodium disticum. And they're very special trees. They shoot out these, what are called root knees, which are these woody protrusions, and they use them just like a diver uses a snorkel. So trees can drown, just like most other organisms. And having these root knees allows it to get extra air. It allows it to respirate a little bit more, which helps it when its roots are fully submerged. It can live its whole life with fully submerged roots, as long as there are root knees that are sticking up and aiding in that respiration. I think they're absolutely beautiful. Most people are used to them at about this size, but before settlers arrived in North America, down in Mississippi and Louisiana, they achieved gigantic size. This tree, this beautiful tree all around us, can live more than 2,000 years and can get almost as wide as a redwood. There used to be titanic groves of them that stretched all through the Atchafalaya Basin. Oh, did you guys hear that call? That I love that one. That's the red-winged blackbird. That is the swamp bird of North America. If you go to a swamp in Washington State, you go to a swamp in Florida, anywhere you want within our United States, you're gonna see red-winged blackbirds. They specialize in swamp ecosystems. They have that beautiful call, and you'll know it when you see it. He's an all-black bird with these bright orange epaulets at the top of his wings. Now, it might be becoming a little bit more apparent, but to our right is an island. It's an island within this park. And it's kind of a special island. Back in 2020, 2 deer swam to this island. It was quiet enough in the city, and the streets were so empty that these deer were able to swim to this island, and they started a family. And they've had multiple generations of little baby deer on the island. And they've been doing super, super well. And so as we slowly cruise past this island, keep an eye out and see if you can't see those deer or see evidence of them hanging out here. They usually sleep in a group together, and there'll be a bunch of smashed down grass showing the location where they slept. And I like that story, and I think it's important. It shows that all it takes is for us to take our foot off the gas just a little bit, for just a little while, and nature is going to start reclaiming space. Nature is going to start thriving again. So looking at this regrowth here, that might not look like too much, but that's super important. Those are black willows, Salix nigra, and they're doing what they do best. They're right along the bank, and they are holding those banks in place with their roots, preventing erosion. That is the typical place to see black willow, because black willow are kind of special. If black willows are ripped apart by disturbance, if one of those branches is pulled off, if one of those leaves is pulled off, it's not a disaster. In fact, they require it in order to spread. When those branches and leaves are deposited by whatever flooding event destroyed the tree, they will take root exactly where they are deposited. And by taking root like that, they are able to restore regions which are being eroded. They are able to keep rivers within their banks, keep lakes within their banks, and keep this habitat solid and in place for generations to come, for all the organisms that require it. And so rather than thinking of disturbance as a disaster, black willow think of disturbance as one of their greatest opportunities. Oh yeah, beautiful, guys. So if you look right to your left, cruising along in the foliage, you'll see a muskrat. Let's back up a little bit. I think that is its hole. Yeah, you can see it slide too. So muskrats, like beaver and river otter, live in little dens, little holes, along the side of a waterway. And they will slide out of their holes straight into the water. And so you can see these slides all along the waterway and know exactly where these creatures live. Muskrats are really cool. They're a native creature, and I would describe them as the beaver light. They don't do that iconic chewing down of trees, but there you go, see them right there? Standing up. But they are water rodents. And this one right here is doing exactly what it does best. It feeds on those water plants. So beaver like to get out of the water and use those massive teeth of theirs to chew open a tree and eat that outer layer of the tree called the cambium, which has tons of nutrients just under the bark. Well, muskrats don't want to go through all that trouble, and so they just eat the water plants all along out here. They're really cool. Sometimes they make their nests on the shore. Sometimes they'll actually build a floating nest, and they'll live and raise their young in a floating nest. So they're boatmen. They're float people, just like myself, just like my partner Jordan. So that's I feel quite a kinship to these organisms. I also like them because a lot of other people don't. You know, they think of muskrats as being a pest, which is completely wrong. These are native organisms, and they're super important. They may be confusing them with the non-native nutria. So nutria are from Europe, and they were introduced kind of in the mid-1800s when the beaver were starting to get rarer and rarer and rarer. And nutria were introduced because, of course, everybody needs their very fancy beaver skin hats. And it's a national security issue if the beaver are starting to get really rare. And so the US government, among other importers, brought in nutria. They had to make sure that we still had our fancy hats. And the nutria are still here, and they're thriving. A lot of people in places like New Orleans who think they see a giant rat are actually seeing a nutria. They have this long, hairless tail, just like a rat. Wow, look at how serene that muskrat is. Look at how adapted it is to living within this human-generated ecosystem. But look at that, for about 6 feet on either side of this river, that's not a human-generated ecosystem. That's a bunch of wildflowers. That's a muskrat. That is a wilderness that is functioning very, very well. It's beautiful what can be achieved with restoration ecology. Man, more swallows flying through. You can always tell a swallow. They fly like no other organism on Earth. Truly, they are more at home in the air than they are anywhere else. So I said that as swallows fly by, they'll tap their bellies to the water. And they'll take some water into their feathers for them to drink later. Cool. But that's not it. I mean, look at them up here, dancing around like they own the place, and they really do. There are no predatory birds in the world that will go after a swallow while it's flying. They don't even try. And that's because no bird in the world is better or more adapted to flight. Everything, there it goes again, right in front of us. Everything about the swallows is adapted to be a master of that space. They're able to make gigantic migrations, continent to continent, some of them more than 5,000 miles. And they're able to do that, in most cases, without stopping a single time. Now, how is that even possible? Not even stopping? It takes them weeks. The answer is, swallows can sleep while flying. Oh yeah. Laboratory studies have discovered that they sleep with one side of their brain at a time while they're flying, taking these infinitesimally small micro naps. They also breed while flying, sometimes while nearing the end of these long migrations. Like I said, they drink while flying, tapping their bellies to the water and then drinking later. They're insectivorous, which of course means they eat insects, and they eat flying insects. So they eat while flying. The only thing they can't do while flying is lay their eggs. And in medieval Europe, they actually thought they did that too. There's this kind of mythological European creature called the martlet, which was just their interpretation of a swift or a swallow. And it was said that it gave birth while flying to live young that immediately started flying. And that the only time they ever touched the ground was after they had already died and fallen to the earth. Now that's not true, but it's really not far from the case. So right here, we have a purple martin house. That's the one on top. That's the largest member of the swallow family, Hirundinidae. And then the ones below that look kind of like hanging baskets, those are the swallow houses. Now, I talked to you guys earlier about the Central Park effect. Well, that's pretty dang important to a migratory animal like this. I said they can travel 5,000 miles. Well, traveling over a park like this, Forest Park Forever built these homes just in case, and in the hopes that they would attract some of these migratory birds, and man, they did it. They did a great job. I have never come near these and not had them full of beautiful purple martins. That slightly purple sheen to their feathers. They're so pretty. Now these guys can fly basically forever. But how do they navigate? It's a great question. How do they know where Ecuador is? God, if you told me to walk to Ecuador, I would have a very difficult time. Well, these guys have a few advantages that we don't have. For one, they have microscopic pieces of iron within their brains, which are magnetized. And those are able to tell direction at any time. They are always able to feel north, a true sixth sense. Now, using that ability to tell north, that's pretty useful, but how do they figure out where they are in the world? Well, they use a map. Right now, guys, we're in the middle of one of the largest migratory patterns in the entire world. It's called the Mississippi Flyway, and it goes straight over St. Louis. Birds from the eastern half of the United States fly west to get here. Birds from the western half fly east, and they meet at the Mississippi, right where the Missouri and the Mississippi converge, right at St. Louis. And they do that because the Mississippi flies all the way down south to the Gulf, and these birds can follow it. They'll follow it and use it as their map. They'll follow the east side of Texas, they'll follow Mexico, they'll follow Central America, all the way down to South America. And so combining those iron filings in their brain and the great map that is this beautiful river, the Mississippi River, they're able to find their way to where they need to go. That's why I kind of think it should be called the Forest Park effect, not the Central Park effect. Because we have so many awesome migratory birds that show up here in spring that you absolutely will not find on the East Coast. The diversity of this park is ridiculous. I'm often surprised by what I see. Last year, I saw several little blue herons from Central America that had gotten blown up here by a hurricane. It's strange to look in there. It used to be these huge, ancient trees, giant eastern cottonwoods, like that creature in the middle there, that had been blown over and broken by the tornado. And now it's so empty. But because of the disturbance, because of the roots being ripped out of the soil, now if you look on the forest floor there, you'll see there are tons of robins. And those robins are attracted by the disturbed soil. The destruction of those trees has given them an edge, has given them a greater chance of finding their food, which are worms and other subterranean organisms. Now I showed you those striggly little black willows earlier. Well, this is what they turn into. A beautiful tree. If given enough time, they'll turn into one of these trees. And look at that iconic willow behavior. Even though this is no weeping willow, its branches still tilt into the water, hoping that its branches will be ripped away by a flood so that it can spread more easily. That's why I love learning about trees. That's why I love learning about any organism. The more you know about those organisms, the more you appreciate just by seeing it. It fills you with such joy. I always say the greatest thing that you can do for yourself is help support your own love of nature. Because it gives you so much joy every day to be like, man, I know that bird. Man, I know that tree. Ooh. You hear that? Brom, brom, brom. That is a bullfrog. Now, bullfrogs are invasive species, but I love them anyway. It's hard not to. They're huge. They're charismatic. They eat anything they can fit in their mouth. They really are a huge issue for waterways, however. Ooh, that's a fun call. Anybody recognize that one? Da-doo, da-doo, da-doo. That's a killdeer. Killdeer are also experts in disturbance. There he is. They love making their nests on the ground in empty, open, rocky areas. Areas that have been disturbed. And so I've seen so many more killdeer after this tornado than before. And they're making their nests there in that open area. They're thriving because of the disaster. Killdeer in general are doing great in the modern world. Empty, open, rocky. If that sounds like something that humans make all the time, it is. It's a parking lot. It's the roof of a building. They love making their nests in those places. And it's important to remember that even though some animals are absolutely doing worse because of human interaction, some animals are doing better. That's a mallard. Mallards are the most successful duck in the entire world. You can find them in North America. They fly down to South America to migrate. You can also find them in Europe, Africa, and Asia. That's pretty much everywhere except Australia and Antarctica. And that's because they are generalists. There is nothing that a mallard can't do pretty well. They are filter feeders, like a whale, if you can believe that. Their mouths are full of tiny protrusions. And even though they don't have any teeth, they have almost 200 lamellae, which are tiny keratinous protrusions, which they use to strain the water. And so they'll take a big gulp of water like a whale, and then they'll push the water out and keep those zooplankton and phytoplankton within their mouth. So these fallen trees are giving an opportunity to these fish that they wouldn't normally have, an opportunity to survive. And this great egret is taking advantage of that. It is standing there like they do, I told you, because of the albedo effect. They stay 80% cooler. He's standing in the full sun and he could be there all day, just waiting for a little fish to show itself. Look at the interesting way that they observe the universe. They often stretch their necks far ahead of their bodies, tilting their head to the side in order to get a good look into the water in front of them. If we're lucky, we may see it catch something. Oh yeah, it's looking. The fact that it is so comfortable, that it feels like it can hunt in front of us, is such a wonderful sign. I did a little bit of research, and the oldest term for heron or egret that I could find came from England, and they called them shite pokes, because their defensive measure, if approached too quickly, is to defecate explosively and fly away. And so these are the two things it does. It strikes in the water, so it pokes, and it shites, I guess. Shite poke. So if you look over here, you'll see some nests. And these are the nests of swifts. So swifts look a lot like swallows, except they're a little bit different. Swifts cannot perch at all. They have to grab on. They grab onto trees, they grab onto cliff walls, and they hang sideways onto them. Their scientific name is Apotidae, which is literally Latin. It means without feet, because while they're flying, their feet are so tucked within their feathers, it looks like they don't have them at all. Also, because it's not possible for them to perch, it gives the impression that they never land at all. Beautiful creatures. And if the image of that all brown little tiny guy perched on a wall reminds you of a bat, it's because bats are copying them. Bats are new upstarts, and they are copying everything that makes a swift beautiful. Their perching mechanism, the fact that they nest sometimes in caverns. Chimney swifts are named that for a reason. You know, sometimes you'll find them in the chimney, but in nature they would live within the inner column of a dead tree, just like a bat. Bats are less efficient though. Swifts can migrate thousands of miles without stopping. Bats can only fly for about an hour at most before they start overheating and have to stop. Mammals are just terribly inefficient creatures. And flight is so hard to achieve. These upstart mammals thinking they can learn to fly, psh, ridiculous. But the fact that the bat gets so hot while it's flying that it has to stop is actually one of its greatest defense mechanisms. Bats are the only group of organisms that can survive having rabies. And that's because while they fly, their temperature gets so hot, in some cases nearly to 120 degrees. That's so hot that it kills off all viruses in their system, except for a few very, very tough hangers-on. And so as the bat flies at night, it's able to kill off its colony of rabies virus, and then as it sleeps during the day, it regenerates. That's why it's always very important to treat bats as if they are all rabid, because so many of them are, and just living a happy, full life with that. We're about to leave this natural system. We're about to leave this restored area and go into the Grand Basin, which looks exactly as it did when it was built for the 1904 World's Fair, which is very cool. But just feel how you feel here in this section of the park. We're in a wilderness. It's said that being in wilderness is one of the healthiest things you can do for yourself. That it reduces heart rate, reduces blood pressure, reduces cortisol and stress hormone levels. And that's just by being here. That's just by taking a moment and drinking it in. Your body feels at ease in a thriving wilderness because it's safe in a thriving wilderness. You can hear the nutrients and life all around you and know that you have what you need here to survive. I want you to feel how different it feels when we paddle through this portal into the Grand Basin. Feels different immediately, right? Sterile, empty, quiet. It is beautiful, but those are also good ways to describe it. I like ending my tour here. I think it's important to end my tour here so that you can fully appreciate what was done to that side of the park. You can appreciate what restoration ecology did for those creatures and for us. Creating that ecosystem gave them a place to stop on their long migratory journeys along the Mississippi Flyway. It gave them a place to fish. It gave them a place to make their nests. It gave them a place to thrive and survive. It's so important to do what we can to support wildlife. Jordan and I have an apartment without a backyard, but we do have a balcony. And so we have 7 window boxes, I guess 9 if you count the ferns. And we have a bird feeder, and we have a little bird bath, and even though we're on the 3rd floor, it attracts finches, house finches, and one of our ferns has a dove nest in it right now. I think it's important in this day and age that we think about what we can do, maybe not for the whole world. The world is big, but think about what you can do for your corner of it. That dove has a home now because we made it one. Those finches have water and food because we built that. If you've got a backyard, I encourage you to plant things that can be pollinated. Flowers of all kinds to attract native bees and native pollinators like butterflies and moths. Thank you guys so much for coming on this tour with me today. Thank you guys so much for coming out here and for taking those first steps. And like I said earlier, being interested in nature is the greatest gift you can give yourself.